And you're all set to go.
Okay. Welcome all. I see a few familiar faces. So for some, welcome back. To others, just welcome. This is our whirlwind tour of assignments in Brightspace, where we're going to very quickly go through how to set up an assignment and how to grade an assignment. So with that, let's get started. So I am in the SUNY Oswego page for Brightspace. So I have my list of all my courses, and I'm going to start by just going into a course. Now, as with all assessments, we generally recommend that you go in through course tools and find the appropriate aggregator. And so here I am in assignments, and I can see all of the assignments that I have in the course. Now, I'm just going to start by creating a new assignment. And the first thing I need to do is simply give my assignment a name. I like using some sort of naming convention that helps me locate where the assignment is in the course if I need to. So for example, this is going to be in, let's say, module 2, and this is assignment number 1 in that area. And then I can just give my assignment a title. Next, do I want this to be a graded assignment? Now, ungraded means that it will still be available for submission. So you can use that for drafts, things like that. But usually we're going to want something to be in the gradebook. Now, if I've already created something in the gradebook, I can link it to something existing. Otherwise, I'm going to say, how many points do I want this to be graded out of? Now, sometimes it is useful. And then I can also give it a due date. The one thing that is not easy to do from here is to put it into a specific category in the gradebook. So usually I would just go ahead and create it. And once I save and close this, it will automatically create the gradebook entry. Then I can go into the gradebook and move that entry into the appropriate category. After that, I go ahead and give whatever my question or prompt is. And I have all the usual tools, so I could add a video in from YouTube or Panopto and give my question regarding that. I can link to outside services, all the usual options. I also have the option to record very short videos or audio if I wanted it to be an audio prompt or a video prompt in Brightspace. These, I believe, are limited to about 30 seconds. Just be aware that you would still need to put up a transcript for accessibility issues. And these are just other options to link materials to this. So if you want to have attachments or things like that, you can also do it through these options rather than through the inline options. Now, on the right-hand side, sorry, I got to get my Zoom interface out of the way. I have a couple of options for further changes. So I can always set up my availability dates. So I can give it a start date and an end date. Usually we don't worry about the more specific release conditions, but sometimes we do use manage special access. And what this does is it allows a specific user to be added with dates that are different from the rest of the class. So I could choose somebody in the class and say, okay, you were out sick with an excuse, so I'm going to change the due date and availability dates for you in particular. Alternatively, if I want to sort of shortcut that, I can use the second option, which just makes it so that only the people that I've added can see the folder rather than everybody seeing it, but certain people having different access options. So I'm just going to save and close this. It will tell me that there's one user with special access, but I would have to go back to special access to see the details. Next are my submission and completion options. The first thing it's going to ask you, is this an individual assignment? So that means everybody submits their own work, or is it a group assignment? In which case I would already have had to create a group and I would simply link it to that. And at that point, it simply gives you the one person submits it, you grade that, and it pushes the feedback back to the entire group. Category here has nothing to do with the gradebook category. This is an organizational tool in the aggregator. We'll touch back on this, but for now I'm going to ignore it. What type of file submission is it? 99% of time, we're going to want it to be a file submission, which would be normally a Word document or some other type of file. If you want to limit it, you can make it just a text submission, or it can even be used for stuff that was submitted in the classroom, or even if you're doing a something like an on-site review of a student teacher or something, you can have it be something that was observed in person. If you're doing file submission, the next thing it's going to ask is how many files are allowed per submission. This is not how many times can they submit the assignment. This is how many files can they attach to an individual assignment. Usually we leave it at a unlimited, so that might be something where I'm uploading a paper and then the bibliography separately. If you really want it to be a specific file extension, you can limit it. Really the only thing that probably would need to be used is to make sure it's compatible with Turnitin, but I'm not sure I've ever actually seen this call as an issue. Next, we have the actual number of submissions that are allowed. So the first one is a student can submit as many times as they want, so long as so long as the assignment is available. The next option is only one submission is available, so it's a one and done. The last option is a little odd. It just continually replaces it. I would not use that one. I would use one of the first two. If for whatever reason you don't get enough emails, you can choose to be notified when an assignment comes in. And that's it for that tab. And finally, we have our evaluation and rubric tools. Most of this is automatically taken care of by the grade option up here, but this is where I can add a rubric and I can create a new one or just grab an existing one. We aren't really making use of learning objectives right now. I don't see any reason not to make the annotation tools available. Anonymous marking simply hides a student's name if you want to really make sure that you're being as objective as possible, but it makes it a little harder to track who's turned something in and who hasn't, and I just don't find it terribly useful. And then really important, we now have our Turnitin integration turned on. So this is our plagiarism detector. There's going to be a different session that will go through the details of how to use this and what functions are available. But for our purposes, if we want to use it, we just click on it. And we say we want to turn on the similarity report. And then the only other option you need to worry about is whether or not you want users to be able to see their own similarity report. Usually I leave this off because the similarity report takes a little bit of practice to understand how to read it. And it can cause students to kind of have a freak out if they don't understand what they're looking at. Again, there'll be another session that goes through the rest of this. So I'm just going to save it for the moment, just so you can see. It'll tell me that it's turned on. And I can always go in and edit these settings. One other thing I will say is always make sure that you're checking all submissions. There are really a lot of fairness options with identifying only a single student to be checked. So always make sure that you're checking the entire class. Oops, I meant to turn that off. Okay, so last but not least, by default, this will always be hidden when it's created. So if I actually want students to be able to access this, I'm going to have to turn it on. There's a few spots where I can do that. And then I save and close. And as with everything, whenever I create something new, it's going to show up here. Or sorry, it's going to show up at the bottom. And I can see it's currently hidden. It currently has special access turned on for one student. That's what the, sorry, my mouse is being a little janky. That's what the key means. And the little ribbon just shows it's linked to the gradebook. I can see how many students have turned it in, how many have I graded, how many have I published. So if this does not necessarily mean they can see it, this means they can see it and when it's due. And I can always get back into all those settings by editing the assignment. This is also where I would go to view submissions and some other options. This is also if I'm doing cleanup where I can delete an assignment. Just be very careful using the delete option. As always, it will give you a pop-up warning. Now, students generally don't have access to this aggregator. But there are some workarounds to that. So if you don't want students seeing an assignment, make sure you've got it locked down by either being turned off or having open and close dates. To make it as easy as possible for students to get to it, though, the next thing we do is go to content and actually deploy this. And so we're going to go to the folder that we want it to be in. And we're going to go to existing activities and select assignments. And this will give us a list of every single assignment in the course. And I'm just going to deploy one. And there it is at the bottom. Now you will see that assignments are a little different from other things in that the instructions for an assignment are actually made public at the top level. So if you have a really long set of discussion instructions, it can be very distracting. So in some cases, you may want to make it so that the discussion instructions are simply a attachment, in which case it looks something like this, where I just have my initial title. And once I click into it, then I can look at what the instructions are. Once a student has submitted their work, which is simply done by, they would come in here and they would see a submission box. I usually like going in through the aggregator, but you can also use Quick Eval, which will show you everything submitted in every one of your courses, who submitted it and what activity it is. But all roads do eventually lead to Rome. So if I go in through through assignments, I can find the assignment I want to look at. And it will tell me, okay, I have 2 assignments I have not looked at all. This particular icon means turn it in as engaged in this one. And I'm going to go in and view these submissions. And I can see who has submitted work. So I'm going to go ahead and Normally I would just start with the first student, but in this case, I'm gonna go ahead and jump to Carrie. And it will tell me what number submission it is, and I can simply click on that file and it will open up a view of that submission as long as it's a compatible file. If it's something like, let's say an AutoCAD file, that you would have to download and then open in the program. But most things like Word documents and things can be opened simply by a simple click. Once I'm in this interface, I have access to my markup tools, which is this annotation button here. And these give me a series of tools that I can use to mark up an assignment directly. Or I can always simply go to the right-hand side. I think I actually didn't include grading on this one because this was a test for something. So let me find a different assignment. So here I can see there's my overall grade. If I had a rubric attached to this, it would appear above. In this case, I'm just giving a manual grade. I'm giving my overall feedback, which is separate from whatever markup I do here. And then if this was a brand new assignment, I would have a publish or save draft option at the end. So it is possible for me to save my comments and go to the next student and then push out all my feedback at the same time. In this case, I'm simply making a quick change. So I'm going to update this. And once I'm done with this student, I just go to the next student. Nobody else has any submissions, but I can simply work my way through the entire class. Easy peasy. And then for students who want to look at their feedback on an assignment, the best option for them is to go to their equivalent of course progress. It is called something else for them. It's called My Performance for them. But once they do that, they're going to have the option for class progress. This is much better than grades for looking at feedback. Now, as an instructor, you'll have a list of every single student in your course, which is why this is chewing for a second. They will not see this list. They will simply be taken to their own view, but in your case, you can hop into the view for any student. Now, this is an assignment, so I'm going to jump directly to my assignments. And I can see here's the assignment I've submitted for it. I can see my general grade, but I can also click details, which gives me access to whatever notes you've made, which is the feedback, and any inline feedback, which is what your markup was. So as the student, I would simply click that, and it will give me my view of whatever markup you did. And that is the easy peasy version of assignments. As always, you're welcome to contact us for further help. You can send an email to help@oswego.edu, which will copy all of the support staff. Or in the course, you can go to Help SUNY Help Desk, which is great for outside hour support. They have all their own options. Or you can always drop into our office hours. The easiest way to get to those is just going to oswego.edu/DLE and going to the first link and going to help and support. And all of our Zoom options are there. And for the summer, we're around Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday. Yeah, Ben, send me a direct email. So in this case, just send it to douglas.hemphill@oswego.edu. And if you want them in Brightspace, just tell me what course you want them uploaded to. Otherwise, I can just send you an email copy of a couple examples.
Great,
Okay.
thank you, Doug.
Yep, everybody have a great one. And Jess, I'll see you in a few minutes.
Yeah, thank you.
Bye-bye.